3 navies heard a man die in 1947. And 79 years later, nobody has ever been allowed to go back and find out what killed him. That's the claim that's followed this ship since the story first surfaced, that somewhere, some government holds the file, that the wreck sits under a quiet order nobody officially signed. I want to know if that's actually true, or if something stranger is hiding underneath it. The message that started all of this went out over the Indian Ocean in June 1947, picked up by listening posts in 3 different countries. Not a routine SOS, a description of a crime scene, tapped out by a man who knew exactly what was happening to him while it happened. All officers, including the captain, dead, lying in the chart room and on the bridge, probably the whole crew. Then static, then 2 final words, I die. Now, the ship was the Ourang Medan, and before we get into what the boarding party found, here's the detail that should bother you more than any ghost story could. In 79 years, nobody has ever proven this ship existed. Lloyd's shipping register is the closest thing the maritime world has to a birth certificate for every commercial vessel afloat. If you sailed under any flag in 1947, you were in there. The Ourang Medan is not. No port of registration, no paper trail, nothing. That single fact should have ended this story before it began. Instead, it survived 7 decades. The waters where this supposedly happened are some of the busiest on Earth. The Strait of Malacca carries roughly a quarter of everything traded by sea on the planet, 260 ships a day. At its narrowest point, it pinches down to under 2.5 kilometers wide. It has also claimed more than 30 ships in the last century, roughly 1 every 3 to 4 years. A working highway with a long memory for disasters. According to the account that eventually went public, a drifting freighter was located after that distress call, dead in the water, no lights, no response. The American merchant ship Silver Star was closest and went to investigate. What her crew found in the version of this story that's been repeated for decades was every man on deck lying on his back, eyes open, mouth open, arms thrown up over his head, as though fighting off something that had come down on him from directly above. The ship's dog was found the same way, teeth bared, frozen mid-snarl at nothing visible. The captain was on the bridge. The officers were in the chart room. The radio operator was slumped over the same telegraph key he'd used to send his last 2 words. No blood, no wounds, nothing to explain any of it. And below decks, where a working engine room should have been hot, the air was reportedly close to freezing, despite the tropical heat above. The Silver Star's captain made the only call that made sense. Don't touch the bodies, tie a line to her, bring her in, and let someone qualified figure out what happened. They got the tow secured. Within minutes, smoke started rolling out of a forward cargo hold. They cut the line and pulled clear. The Ourang Medan reportedly went up with enough force to lift her hull entirely out of the water before she broke apart and went under. Every body, every log, every piece of physical evidence that might have explained any of it, gone in the same afternoon. Someone finally got close enough to look. That's the story. And here's where it stops being a ghost story and starts being a paper trail problem. The man usually credited with bringing this to public attention was an Italian named Silvio Shirley, who told it to a Dutch-Indonesian newspaper, De Locomotief, in February 1948. His version placed the sinking near the Marshall Islands in the Pacific, passed to him second-hand through a missionary who'd supposedly heard it from a single, surviving German crewman. That's 3 layers of retelling before this ever reached print. The same newspaper later revised its own account, moving the sinking to the Strait of Malacca in a completely different ocean. And the dates don't behave either. Researchers digging through older archives found nearly identical versions of this exact story already circulating in 1940, 8 years before the famous account, describing a disaster that hadn't supposedly happened yet. Even the rescue ship has a problem. By the time the Ourang Medan supposedly sank, maritime records show the real Silver Star had already been renamed the Santa Cecilia and was running commercial routes near Brazil, nowhere close to where this story needed her to be. A ship with no registration, a rescue vessel that wasn't where the story required, a timeline that existed before the event it described. None of that requires a government cover-up. It requires something more ordinary, a story repeated by enough people in enough versions until nobody noticed it had stopped matching itself. So what's actually left once you take away the parts that don't hold up? One theory comes from a German researcher named Otto Mielke, who published an account in 1954 claiming the ship was carrying an unregistered cargo of potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin, or in a darker version, stockpiles of tabun nerve agent, originally developed by Nazi Germany and later shared with Japanese forces. Tabun fits the forensic detail better than almost anything else proposed. It blocks the signal that tells muscles to relax, locking the body into rigid, contorted postures at the moment of death. It also disperses quickly in open air, which would explain why the boarding party wasn't affected hours later. If true, this wasn't a registered ship at all. It was a vessel deliberately stripped of identifying papers to move cargo that violated international law, which would explain exactly why no clean documentation ever surfaced. The second theory is mechanical, an undetected fire in the boiler system, leaking carbon monoxide through the crew's quarters while they slept or stood watch. Plausible and far less exotic. It doesn't explain the bared teeth, the raised arms, a dog dying in the same defensive posture as the men around it. Carbon monoxide kills quietly. This didn't look quiet. And the last theory is the one most retelling skip, that the Ourang Medan was never one specific ship at all, but a story that absorbed real disasters from a genuinely dangerous stretch of water and gave them a single, unforgettable name. The Strait of Malacca was losing ships on a predictable schedule throughout this era. A named ghost story travels further than 30 anonymous wrecks ever could. The US Coast Guard's own publication, Proceedings, printed an account of this case in 1952, 5 years after the supposed sinking, treating it as a documented incident rather than folklore. That's not nothing. That's an institution with no obvious motive choosing to put it on paper. No one has spent the decades since trying to locate the wreck, because no one has ever agreed on which ocean to search. Not the Pacific account, not the Indian Ocean account, no coordinates anyone has ever stood behind. There is no order keeping anyone away from the Ourang Medan. There is no file marked classified. There is only an empty space on a register where a name should be, and 2 oceans that have never agreed on which one swallowed her. If she went down at all, she is still down there, in whichever water actually took her, carrying a name that may have belonged to a different ship entirely, or to no ship at all.